Huge thank you, and I'm going to hand it over to Raimundas Malašauskas. Thank you.
I'm drawing this letter to you in my head. I'm drawing a head starting with an ear, and at some point the ear occupies the entire sheet. I'm drawing this letter to you in my head. I'm drawing a head starting with an ear, and at some point the ear occupies an entire sheet, entire street, entire conversation, and there is no room left for anything else. It is just a conversation. But I'm sorry I couldn't pick up the phone. A simple thought of hearing my own voice was unbearable. While I was looking at your name on the screen in silence, the silence was turning more deep. It felt like a syrupy, velvety carpet on the wall and on the floor, swelling to absorb all the details. I didn't want to disturb the silence by answering your call and hearing my own voice saying hello. It felt like the carpet was growing, absorbing one's legs into ripples of disco music. And I didn't want to rip the silence apart, and kept staring at your name blinking, contemplating what I will tell you afterwards. Will I tell you that I simply missed your call because I was at a dinner? Or will I write an extended letter about my reluctance of hearing my own voice in that silence? And I still don't know, and time is passing. Maybe I will say I misread your name. It looked like Sphinx or Larynx. More like larynx than sphinx. And so I'm sitting in this room and contemplating what to tell you. And it's been already an entire week like this. But what I will tell you is the following. I'm fantasizing, well, I'm more of following. I'm following my usual train of thoughts to come on stage. Yes, there is a stage, and there is a center of the stage. To install myself there, to start telling a story about some difficulty or a missed connection, then ask the audience to close their eyes and continue telling them the story about the head I'm drawing. And then tell them at some point to open their eyes, which is, I guess it's much later. There's a lot of things happening in between. And when they open their eyes, they see someone else on stage, and that person is continuing telling the story in exactly the same voice. And maybe that voice comes not from the person even. It comes from an air fan or a drop of temperature, a pocket in one's pants, or many things at once. So I'm about to draw that head, a human head, of someone who's never been here before. Neither you nor me, nor someone we know. Drawing gives that enormous power to concoct a human figure out with few lines. Someone will be emerging in the movements of the hand across the sheet of paper, in a loose, hairy line designating its humanhood. Obviously, it is a profile, an open profile, I would say, spitted in loose ends. The ear comes first. Strong, chanterelle-like ear. I want to be wrapped in it. It surprises me. This ear could play music, not just receive sounds. And what kind of music would it play, I wonder, staring at this ear? I love watching people whose bodies are softly moving while they wait for a train, as if listening for a song or a beat from inside. No headphones are visible. They are not humming. They are undulating, catching something across their muscles and nerve tips, and inner beat-making, breath-making. How can I share all those beats that are in my head now? And they are not beats yet, if they are not audible for someone else, right? And so I'm going deeper into that enormous ear, which is growing deeper on the sheet of paper too. And there is, at some point, hardly any room left for the rest of the head. But okay, I need to squeeze it in, that rest of the head, display it somewhere, tuck it in somewhere around that ear. Or maybe just forget it. The ear is enough. Let's play it by ear, they say, and disappear. Perhaps it is a good moment to say that it is not a usual thing for me to be invited for such an improvisation with drawing and dancing in words. I'm more accustomed to the invitations to present a project or two to an audience sitting in front of a screen. And I do enjoy guiding people through exhibitions that took place or that will take place, or even exhibitions that were about to take place, but it didn't. The most recent one is called 914, 914, you could say, 914. It was the title of the Russian pavilion in the 59th Venice Biennale that I was curating. A few months ago, I was trying to describe it in words to convey the sort of structure, essence, tonality of that exhibition, or what people also call the theme, the subject, the spectrum of the subjects. It sounded something like this. Choreographed as a scene of gestures, Kirill Savchenkov's and Alexandra Sukareva's presentation in the 59th Venice Biennale is an attempt to address the complexity of bodily, material, and technological times. The principles of time are investigated under the light of history, of Russian culture, science fiction, and contemporary technologies. The exhibition evokes a transition from one state to another one, a twisted flow between future and past, a suspended division between dead and alive, and AI, day and night, sliding between languages and representations, pausing on the most recent social memory, freezing in anticipation of things unforeseen, preparing for tomorrow, be it catastrophic or bright or both, is on view. Mirrored structures, chemical reactions, sound, photography, and performance light each other up on a display. And a few months later, the introduction has changed somehow, or maybe became more precise, maybe became more concrete. The past ripens in the future. A deconstructed line from Poem Without a Hero by Anna Akhmatova lies at the core of 914. Both the tossed words of the poem and the title of the Russian pavilion reflect the complex life of time. They evoke the dreamlike indeterminacy of an event emerging 1,000 years from now, be it in future or in past, or somewhere at one's fingertips, underneath one's nails. A sense of premonition, which is a key subject of 914, an ongoing state of alert bordering on anxiety, paired with sudden astronomic shifts in scale and dimension, permeate the atmosphere. The main engine of 914 is a concrete conversation of the last 10 years between two Russian artists, Alexandra Sukhareva and Kirill Savchenkov. Choreographed as a scene of gestures and appearances, 914 takes place in the building of the Russian pavilion, losing the number 1, which ties the original construction of the building by Alexei Shusev under the last years of the Romanovs' rule in 1914. Since its renovation, the building dwells on airy transparency and openness. Throughout the decades, the pavilion has performed multiple roles led by different agendas. This time it witnesses itself as a character in a mirror, both optically and literally. Every new future produces new past, doesn't it? Alexandra Sukhareva and Kirill Savchenkov look at each other. But the invitation of Edgar to come to the Choreographic Devices comes from a more distant past, 2020. Back then, I was preparing a stage act with Alix NOD, a miraculous choreographer who lives in Vienna and plays with all things imaginable and unimaginable, unimaginable, and highly crafted. It is her whose phone call I missed in the beginning of today's talk or invocation, whatever we want to call it. She couldn't come to London this time, and so I'm left to my own choreographic devices, like drawing and painting in words. Silk Painter is the title from that initial scenario. But let me go back to the drawing. So when I look at the ear on the sheet of paper now, I see a mask or a skull in what could be described as the middle of something, or a door, but now I'm facing it, and it feels more frontal, while the movement of the hand before felt more windy or visceral, sailing across self-invoking lines, sailing and sculpting at once, casting brims and rounded profiles, depth of orifices and twists of fate, of a form, scanning evaporated obsessions, slightly tarnished but fierce and laughing in the depth of what sinks like a watermark. It is all about the movement, I think first, swinging a wrist left and right, wiggling it back and forth, feeling a sense of imbuing relaxation of a familiar manual gesture that I associate with daydreaming more than with a focus perhaps, although there is focus inevitably there in the wrist, a swinging pendulum, a calligraphic drizzle. And at this moment I promise myself not to look back, not to return to the previous sentence, but to repeat the entire journey instead. To repeat that movement of a thumb and a wrist swinging a ball pen in a pendular movement. It could be writing a single letter, could be writing a word, could be drawing a pencil, an extension of a pencil, and how it casts a shadow, a bit of an imaginary one, that shadow, with sharp corners though, up and down, and then along the elliptical curve, like drawing a time zone for a child on a tomato, and then tomato juice spills on a plane, and why people drink that tomato juice on the plane. I don't want to think about pressure and taste buds, and why not? And their correlation, so correlated and meant to be together and never disassembled back and forth, or left to right, and one writes from left to right and right to left, up and down, inside the letter and outside of the letter, following the shape of A and repeating it many times along its lines, in all the subtraction of corners, removal of translators, implosion of associations, going deeper and darker into the letter A, from inside and outside, and then arriving to letter B perhaps, or another knot. Going from A to B is such an act of irreversible, of irretraceable, erasable. And B may be for burn, because the hand was moving in burn, when I could suddenly hear music while following the movement of a hand as seen in a drawing. A melody would swing in my ears while the hand was moving. There must be a name for that transposition of senses through movements, like drawing A letter and hearing B letter, or never arriving to a completion of an intention because it is cross-cut by something else, less important and more important, never so important, but obviously cutting the intention in half, like that name for the transposition. But here we go. I start with a movement of my hand and emulating the lines of a drawing. I see where that movement can take me to which sensation produced by a movement, to which state or a sentence produced by pendular invocation of a wrist it takes me to. It has less to say than I thought, but it says something, blinks back and forth like a spiritist table, muscular tone and fingers staying tied together like a metaphor. And if intention requires movement from A to B, from what it is intended to what is to be accomplished, that I'm already somewhere not there. I'm already somewhere not there in facing all those forms one may produce without intention. Exactly that, by allowing the physical exercise of a wrist and fingers and other particles, known as particular as the rational subject, trying to repeat the movement like drawing letter B in 100 lines, building a word like a nest, building a nest and a lens, kind of letting the hay flow outside of the crown and outside of a cabin. It feels like bedroom in my scarf, the smell of that room, and the whole apartment. And I remember how I'm telling you that I'm just one loop in a track, a broken loop, like something between B and A, a sculptural loop. And after a short silence, which is a part of a loop, I say, yeah, maybe it's too much of an identity claim to say that I'm an autonomous loop of something in this track, be it a short melody or percussion. Why not to be a tonality of a sense crossing the loop and the texture of a trombone? I've been thinking about that jazz trombone today, not as something as identifiable as a loop, not as something as identifiable as me or you, but more as a glimpse of a state of a relationship, something across the lines and spills in ink and play, making the thinking about intention visible, an intention swinging between A and B, and what words don't say, because it is about a feeling in a hand and how it goes up and how it swells into paper. Still, it reminds me of something larger than two letters, larger than two words, but kind of inseparable from what it wants to be, an intention of sorts. And now I play the loop again and enter bedroom, and from there spring into the scarf, which carries my nose across, carries the nose apart. It could be my apartment, that doodle, carrying us like moons inside a carousel, a circular device, no doubt. How much a word tends to appear due to a constellation of words prior to it, or a constellation of words preceding it and being anticipated. As a matter of rhythm and movement, as a matter of recurrence, fully mooned, fully on the paper, full moon zoom. And I want to repeat this pattern of repeating the gesture. Smelling the scarf and entering that room, following the loop and a song that plays there. And perhaps I don't want to come back from this constellation of a scarf, of room, a bass loop circling in the track, playing in the background. And when the track plays, the room emerges, while the sequence of loops is sculpting its shape, the shape of the corridor, where a scarf is resting for several days and nights. And those days and nights stitch the scarf with the smell of the apartment, slightly moldy, a new mold, and then a scarf leaps across the cities. But the baseline is running, even when it swells like a loop, full loop, open one, back and forth, swinging from one corner to another one, with a soft pen, inking the ride, connecting lots and dots, broken leaps and loops, in a movement of forms that one creates without intention. Thinking about intention though, does it work like A and B, or neither, both and neither, across the line, retracing one's have movements in that room? Could be in Bern, could be somewhere else, but why to trace it back or forward? If traceability is what is happening between unfolded presents, like A, where an intention starts, and B, where pretension kicks in, where a shape realizes its involuntary, yet particular character, and decides to pretend There was no way for it to look otherwise, or no other way, just my intention. A tip of direction reaching somewhere else than the state of affairs, strung on muscular tone of the hand, fanning itself across the sheet of paper, with a repetition of lines along each surface, along each line, along each repetition, but kind of compact, contained. If it was a room, I could perhaps live in it. Not just me, maybe even someone else from the scarf. And then I would become claustrophobic of the constellation of elements, generating the movement of a hand caught in an act of release, through repetition, through thoughts whose exact shape is what makes claustrophobia grow. Grow like a shape. Yes, it could also be a shape of something else, as encased by something that now starts requiring an effort, as it is not anymore just an involuntary drift of the hand back and forth, left and right. Now it is caught by a shape it wants to reproduce, a shape that is so familiar and never seen before, and never seen in its entirety, only in its recurrence, a shape that calms one down, but threatens with corners, but calms one down. And there is no need to pretend there is an intention there, and there is no need, or the room either.